right. Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne. I am a recovering codependent chaos creator as well, and an Al-Anon as well. And so, yeah, I was reading. So during, if you've taken LifeLab, you'll know that we are encouraged to connect with God, and one of the ways that we connect with God is these things called daily practices. And so, a part of that is reading from the good book, which is the Bible. And so I was reading, and so what I do in my journal is if I ever like see something that I feel is like maybe some kind of inspiration from God, or feel like, oh, this is something that maybe could be shared in the future with others, I just like make a little mark. And so I was stumbled across this piece of scripture called from the book of Proverbs, and it's Proverbs 20:27, and it says, "The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord that sheds light on one's inmost being." And I was like, oh, okay. I've been reading through the big book. Like I've been through these 12 steps here, and I remember something about God being the sunlight of the spirit. And so it just felt like a really nice connection. And so I want to explore that more. And so that's what I'm planning on doing right now. And so actually, thankfully, it is sunny out today here in Ottawa. I don't know about you, but I find maybe it's because I'm from the prairies and we get it's really cold there in the winter, but my goodness, we get a lot of sunlight. And I'm always very grateful for that. It's like you have all the sun like pouring through your front window, like it is even in my house this morning. And it feels so warm and you're like, oh, it feels glorious. It feels like I'm in Florida along with, Wayne and Wendy. Is that where you guys are? I think so. And yet you step outside and it's freezing. It's like -15 and there's wind and it's, ugh. And so anyway, it's deceptive. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So I got this cool little quote online somewhere. So I'm sorry, I don't know where I found it, but I wrote it down when I was researching Sunlight of the Spirit in this particular scripture. And it says, "The lamp is not that light of God, but the vessel through which the light of God may shine, illuminating our hearts and shining forth his light and love to a lost and dying world, to those still suffering. But before we can be used effectively by him as this vessel, I believe we need to welcome his inner scrutiny into our inner being and become willing to submit to his searching our hearts, our hidden thoughts, and our secret motives." In brackets, I wrote like our fear, our resentments, our harms, our conduct within the world, so that we may be fit vessels to shine forth his light to others. All right, so all of that said, I'm going to tell you a story about this time that my husband Josh and we love to go to Montreal with people, without people, whatever. We find it's a really fun little place that we would probably not want to live, but we love going an hour and a half or 2 hour drive. And all of a sudden it feels like we're in the Canadian New York City with tons of culture and art and food of every single kind, and most of it's delicious. And just, we love going in there and having a good time. So we found out about this restaurant called Au Noir. And it is a restaurant that is actually pitch black. You go and eat in complete darkness. And so you go in, there's lockers for all of your stuff. So you're not like scrambling trying to find your stuff. So there's lockers, you put your stuff in lockers, and then you order your food, you look at the menu, you order your food, and then once you're all good to go, someone takes you to your table. And the really neat thing actually is that all of the servers are blind. And so they have no issue in the darkness. They are used to it. And so they guide you, you hold on to each other like a train, and they take you and they seat you at your table and the other person at their table, and they tell you their name. So if you need anything, you yell their name and they'll come. If you have to go to the bathroom, they come and get you and take you to the bathroom. They don't watch you or anything, but they take you to the door. There's a dim light. You can see what you're doing, but then you go back. And so I was like, that's crazy. We go in and I was blown away. I've never been in such darkness before. for the good, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, my eyes, I'm sure, were completely dilated because I'm like, my eyes are searching for any form of light possible, like any kind of sliver of light, but I couldn't find it. And it was really hard to adjust. Like, I was like, should I just shut my eyes? I don't really know. So, but yeah, it was amazing how Josh and I joked, we're like, people could be like without clothing in here. Like, there's people all around me. Who knows what's going on around me? Anyway, that's just a side note. It was somewhere where our brains went. But it was amazing to go somewhere so dark, and how even like this little faintest bit of light, like if there was anything, immediately it was almost like our eyes darted to it. It knew where to go. And like even like this dim light when I would go to the bathroom, like in like when it was surrounded by darkness, like it actually seemed so bright. And so I was thinking about that, about like how our natural inclination is actually not to love darkness. We are, in our very natural human nature, we're drawn to light. Our eyes naturally search for it. And so it is, I believe, with our spirits. We need to grow, and we naturally are drawn to growth. We need to know, and we all need love, and we long for love and to be loved. We long for God's light, God's spirit, whether we know it or not, whether we believe it or not. We are always looking for light in the darkness. You know, even in the world that we live in, I think so often when, it just shows me, I think, even just like the nature of God in us is that, like, I think of a child that says, that's not fair. I want that toy and that person did this. It's like, where did that come from? Where did our natural morality come from? Well, it's like good. Our hearts just long for what's good and what we believe is right. And so, it is God and God alone that is actually this light. It's this lamp that's in the darkness. And it is better, it's better to see things, and I'll get into this about like how bleak sometimes, because sometimes we see things that are not great and are hard. But no matter how bleak they may seem, we really just need God's power to do something about the dark things inside of us. And so that bleak, from my experience in recovery, the bleak stuff that I became aware of, the hard stuff, the ugly stuff, it can be transformed, and it can actually turn into something that's hopeful. And God takes it and makes it good and gives peace and love. And that's all because of his light and his spirit just shining down. So, I'm going to tell you another story that actually happened to me a few weeks ago. I was going to bed. Normally, I go to bed very easily. I have 3 little kids, and I'm normally exhausted by the time my head hits the pillow. But this night, I was kept awake, and I was super frustrated, but I was like, whatever. And so I just laid there, and I was like, God, is there something you'd like me to like know about? Because I was like, I'm going to pass some time. Sure, God, I'll talk to you. And I sensed, I was recalling an experience that I had recently where I felt really rejected. I felt excluded. I felt that I wasn't worthy of this person's attention or even a relationship with them. And I felt that just these like insecurities that people just simply put up with me. And maybe people would rather avoid me if they were given the chance. And so I was like, okay, God, this thing's tumbling around in my mind. I don't want it to become an obsession. Like, what do I do about this? And I sensed God asking me to go back to the first time that I ever felt this. Think of a memory, Joanne. Think of those same feelings, the first time that possibly you felt this. And so I was thinking about it. So then I went to about like probably grade 2 or 3. And I remember there being this distinction between, there were kids that were like obviously a part of this like group. And then there were kids that were not a part of this group. And so how the group formed, I have no idea, but I do know that I was not a part of the group. And so I sensed God being like, okay, how did you feel? Like, what might have been in your head? And I think the biggest thing here is that I'm trying, and this is kind of, if anybody has been through therapy of any kind of like inner child wound work, this is kind of what I'm talking about. But it was so easy for me as an adult to rationalize things and make excuses for others and be like, well, they didn't know any better. And because da 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 da. And I felt God being like, no, how did you feel? How did you feel as that little 7-year-old Joanne? How did she feel? Think about that. And so, what would have gone through her head? And so, what would have gone through my head, from what I understand or what I felt in that moment, was like, why didn't they choose me? Why wasn't I asked to join? What was it about me that was not worthy, that wasn't acceptable, that didn't fit, that wasn't good enough? Why didn't I get chosen? And so I felt God being like, good job. Sit in that for a little while. Feel that. Feel the hurt. Feel the pain. Acknowledge it. Don't reject it. Just sit in it because it's real. Don't overthink it. And so here I am still sleeping, or in my bed wishing I was sleeping. But in that moment, as I sat there and felt the discomfort, I really sensed God just pour out his love and his acceptance and his security on me. And I felt like a sense of belonging that I would always rationalize in my head as an adult, but it was whatever was in my head that I knew was right and how I should feel and how I should be really came into my heart. And I started to believe in that moment that why would I care what mere humans think of me and whether they deem me worthy or acceptable or worth loving? Like, why would their opinion matter to me more than this God of the universe, the God who welcomes me and saves me and rescues me and heals me and loves me? He delights in me. Why is his opinion the last on the list? Why is it that that's the last resort? Oh yeah, God. Okay, yeah, you love me. That's good enough. But it just felt like in that moment, I felt good in my own skin. I felt like that those voices just don't matter, whether they're fancied or they are real. And so that to me was an experience of the sunlight of the Spirit coming on me. And so I understand that for me, it's not like I go to bed every night or I'm, in my house and I get these beautiful inspirations and the Lord just comes to me and heals everything and makes everything better in a moment like that. That's not my normal. My normal, actually, for these moments of like healing and these sunlight spirit moments, I believe have really made a big lasting longing impact on me were through the 12 steps, actually, and through LifeLab and what I come to know even within church. And so we're going to talk about that, about this sunlight and how important it is for the sunlight to come into those innermost parts of us. And so I'm going to read from the big book, two different spots, but I'm going to start with page 63 at the very end. And so it says, next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have been little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor or our food or our drug of choice or our adrenaline or controlling fixing or chaos creating was but a symptom. So we had to get down to the causes and conditions. And so that first part just really shows me like taking stock, this thorough house cleaning of our life. That is a big part of, I believe, the sunlight of the Spirit starting to come through. And so this is found in step 4 and 5 in our inventories. And then also actually in step 8 and 9, similarly, once we look at all those things and admit our wrongs, or admit our fears, admit our resentments, our harms, really, actually, we start to look at our harms and begin wanting to make amends for those. But not just simply saying we're sorry to other people, but actually I think equally as important are these living amends, these amends where I'm going to turn and do something different. I'm not going to be like a little child that says, "Oh, so sorry, I didn't mean to do it," and then do it like 5 seconds later. Like the whole transforming part is being like, "Okay, God, like I recognize that these are the things that I typically lean to do. These are the things how I typically hurt myself or hurt other people. Can you actually give me the power not to do those things?" But not only that, it's not just this behavior management, it's about God coming in and doing those healing works, these wounds, these things, these fears that we gravitate towards and we believe and we get on board with every day. God, would you replace those fears with your love? Would you replace those fears with your peace, with your security, with knowing that I belong, knowing that I'm okay and that you accept me? And that's actually the most important thing that I need to believe every day. And so from that place flows my conduct. That's the goal. It doesn't always happen, obviously, but that's the goal. And so, you know, there's this, my sponsor gave me this, I don't know if this is like a common thing in recovery. I've only been around for a few years here now, but that like she talked about like it's almost like a glass vase that light can't penetrate it if there's a bunch of rocks and boulders and even pebbles and gravel in it. It doesn't matter how big or small those things are. If they're in there, you're not going to let light go through. And so she would ask me like, "Joanne, how free do you want to be? How much light do you want? How much peace would you like?" And she's like, "Be fearless and thoroughly go through this work and look at the things." And I'm going to stop there for a second and actually jump real quick to page 66 of the big book. And I'm going to start kind of on that first paragraph where it says, "It is plain." All right, I'll get back into it. "It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic or the controller fixer or the drug addict or the food addict, the pornography addict, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of adrenaline, controlling, fixing, people pleasing, gossip returns, and we begin to obsess again. And with us, to obsess is to die." And so these resentments and fears and harms, this hurtful conduct, that's the darkness. That's the stuff that keeps us in the dark. That's the stuff that harms us. And it says here, this is the stuff that actually takes us to the grave. Whether it's a death that happens tomorrow, or it's a death that's a long, painful, arduous one that keeps me miserable until the day that I physically die. And so the opposite, the other side of it is, can I embrace forgiveness and love and acceptance? Can I make amends? Can I confess to another person the ugly things that I don't really want others to see? Because when these things start coming out, I believe that they come into the light. They come into God's light, and he sees them with us. He knows they're there, but he sees them with us, and he's fine with it. But he also says, like, let's talk about that and let's do something about that. I don't want you to remain a mess. I want you to get cleaned up, like this good housekeeping talks about. I want you to be pure. I want you to be blameless. And it's possible. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's possible to live this way. And so for me, I mean, it was extremely threatening. There was stuff in my life I had no idea was there, and it was ugly and it was scary because, like, I didn't want to see myself that way. I was fighting so hard for other people and even myself to not see me and see these things. I wanted to only present something that I thought would be accepted by others. And so I think that this process as I went through it, it wasn't scary because I realized that I have a gentle, loving father. The big book and the good book refers to him as the father of light, even, and that he is safe, and that there's also people around me that are safe. There's people that are I can trust, that I can walk through this darkness. Oh, that's my 20-minute thing. Oops. Okay. Okay. Sorry, guys. Let's keep rolling. Step 12 is vital, which is what I wrote. We start to discover that our whole purpose after coming through these journeys of the 12th step, or through LifeLab, or both, or any other kind of recovery program, is actually to work with others, because thank goodness other people did these things and other people practiced their 12 step, because if not, I wouldn't have been able to go through it. And so I get to pass that on. And then I begin to discover that this is my job and my work at the end of the day. When I face the end of my life, what is the purpose? Was it so that I could be like, look how nice my house is, and look how nice my children are, and look, I got all this stuff, and whatever. No, it's not about that. When I look at the end of my life, the whole point is, did I help pass on a message of hope to those who are still suffering? Did I love others well? And so I think at the end of the day here, we are vessels through which God's light can shine, but we cannot shine God's light if we have a bunch of blocks inside of us that won't let the light through. And so this is hard and strenuous work. It takes a lot. It's vigorous, but it's really worth it. That's been my experience. And it really has brought light into my life and has turned things that are ugly and hard that weigh inside of me, and has given me freedom. But at the end of the day, it's God. It's not me. God's the one that's going to do it. And he does do it, just like he came to me that one night and said, hey, Joanne, let's talk about something. Let's experience something. God really cares. He wants to see us free. He wants his light to be poured into us and then through us. And so that's all the time that I've got. I've got more things, but clearly I've over prepared, and that is a good thing. All right, I'm going to leave it up.